Megan is the first to arrive, so she gets Brian's spot up in the corner. I remember one time, this is the last time this happened, people were freaked out, right, Megan?
Yeah, I'm here to freak people out this morning, I guess.
We are here. It's Brian. Brian was not the first one here, maybe because he was so tired from seeing Goose last night. Possibly.
Probably.
I was setting up the women's final on the French Open on the TV, and it took half a second longer because I don't know if do you guys watch tennis?
I used to growing up, but I don't now.
So like I just watch the majors. I'm a creaster of tennis. But Wimbledon, the Australian Open, and the US Open it's impossible to avoid. Like they're on every, it's so easy to watch them. The French Open, you have to like type in passwords and like go to secret accounts to watch it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then they decided to show the two finals on the semifinals on tape delay, which is insane in 2024. But the finals are on NBC because, of course, like it's like they've always been here. So I had to figure out where it was. And it's 7:00 in the morning. And let's go, Iga.
That's good. That's great. Thank you for that, Brian. Well, I'm at the bottom of the screen because I'm the last to arrive, as always. Although I do have some excuse of some kind, always. And Brian and Megan accept those excuses no matter what. Today, it's that my kids keep asking me if their teenage cousins are going to be awake soon.
No.
And
the answer is no.
I tried to explain A, teenagers like to sleep, and B, I don't know when they're going to wake up because I'm not connected to their brains, and I don't know if they're going to wake up soon. But the last time you asked 6 minutes ago, still kind of the same answer. I don't know. I don't know when they're going to wake up.
My kids definitely will still be asleep when I am done with this podcast. And
which is kind of awesome.
I think I have 7 teenagers sleeping in my house right now, and they will be asleep for quite a while.
Right. You have a lot of teenagers. Okay. Well, this is the teenager discussion portion of the pod. Thank you for tuning in on Instagram, YouTube, X, Facebook, and also listening. Okay, guys, we are going to be talking about fall 1998. Brian has nothing to say. I have a lot to say. I think Brian and I are going to switch roles from from a couple weeks ago, but it's going to be fun. I want to say first, if you guys didn't see the news, you heard it here at least. We are re-releasing Under the Scales Into the Wild for free. It's been behind a paywall for several years because it was part of our premium offering, but we decided to just bring it. We decided to bring it to you for free, and I want to just say that people are loving it so far. The songwriting weekend, I don't know if you guys remember that episode, but that's about the Tom and Trey going and then the RV and the scary girl and the grocery store and knocking over all the stuff. And I mean, just epic stories. We're going to be releasing a few per week until we release them all. And in exchange, we're asking you to please consider supporting Osiris Premium, which you can do for $5 a month, osirispod.com/premium. It helps all of us. We're all we're all volunteers, but we need to keep the lights on at Osiris. So even if you're not like interested in getting ad-free content or bonus content or whatever, you can still support us and help make Osiris thrive and help us continue to thrive by supporting what we do. So consider doing that. Just go to osirispod.com/premium, $5 a month. That's less than the cost of one latte at Starbucks per month.
Per month. There's just no excuse not to do it. There's no excuse.
I'm not saying $5 per day. I'm not saying $5 per hour. I'm saying $5 a month.
And I'd argue we're of a higher quality than a Starbucks latte. You're not even comparing this to like your
100%.
neighborhood, like, organic espresso shop. This is,
It's true.
We're really thinking this through. And hey, if you donate, maybe you could suggest the theme that we do next year. We'll take it into consideration at least.
That's true.
Yeah.
We still haven't figured out what next year looks like.
Sorry, Brian.
I have a Starbucks around the corner from my office, and let me tell you, their sausage, cheddar, egg on a English muffin is really divine. In the
that's
morning.
A good one.
You just need like a quick sandwich,
and
I don't have
that
like
one.
I don't have like a New York bistro near me where I can go and get a Taylor ham, egg, and cheese or something amazing. So I have to go to Starbucks because it's Denver. It's the most white bread food city in America. And it holds up. I'm going to argue in favor of it. But our podcasts are better and worth the $5.
But that's, Brian, That's probably the most intense sandwich that Starbucks has. I consider myself a little bit of a Starbucks breakfast sandwich expert. That's like the one that you're like, I'm going all in.
Wait,
It's
what do
my
you mean
solid go-to.
intense? Like it's like a real
It's probably like
thing?
it's like the heaviest and most delicious. You know, there's some
Yes.
bullshit ones
Okay.
that are like turkey, bacon, and egg whites, and you're like, I mean, why even bother? Like, what are we doing?
Well, I
They're
used to eat
not
those little
skimping
egg
on the
bites.
egg or the sausage patty. It's a robust sausage patty. But Brian Weinstein here coming in from the top rope with cake pops win everything. He's not
That's for
wrong.
Sure.
My
For
kids
sure.
not
definitely
wrong.
agree with that.
What a
Yeah.
great take at 9 a.m., 7 a.m.
11.
Mountain Time.
Brian gave us
come in
shit
and-
about being up this early, recording this early, and of course he's in the chat. I said to him, "You're a teacher. Don't act like you are not up at 9 a.m." Also,
You can't avoid
Brian
it.
had the best comment about teaching this week, so I have to shout this out. It's been really hard. I'm on my last week of school. I have 3 days left with kids. It is the struggle bus at the end. Let me just tell you, getting like, final projects done, parents coming in on Tuesday. I've got report cards I'm putting in, and I had to write all the narratives. It's just a lot. The kids are like amped up. It's almost summer. You're ready to be done, but then they also like are loving you, and you're like going to miss them, and it's feeling bittersweet, and they're hugging you all the time. It's this mix of emotions. And I said to Brian yesterday, "Is it always this bad?" And he said, "It's different. It's like bad in a different way every year. So it feels like it's the worst every year." And I thought, that's so true.
Oh,
It's different for teachers. Like things are bad with kids in a different way every year. So it keeps it interesting, but also feels terrible in a way every year. So
Wow.
thanks, Brian, for putting that
That's-
like so succinctly.
coming from
That's-
the people in charge of our children's future. Thank you.
It's mostly love. It's mostly love.
I know.
It's mostly
just
love.
like parenting. It's just like parenting when people are like,
Yes.
as they get older, it doesn't get easier or harder. It just gets different, but like the same amount of hard. I'm like, that sounds bad.
Exactly.
Okay, so everyone could spend $5 a month to support us. We are not profiting from this podcast. We're profiting spiritually and emotionally, and I guess that's it. I want to
Big
just say
time.
quickly,
big time on all of those. Big time.
on all this.
Absolutely. Same.
I want
But
to say that
financially be okay as well.
yes,
It wouldn't
yes.
hurt, but we
would be
do it
good.
for the good reasons. It's just
We just mostly
it'd be
try to
nice
keep the lights
have
on.
that.
The lights, the proverbial lights. That's it. I want to say that my friend Dave, who Megan, I know you met in New York a couple times, and Brian, you probably met him at some point. Anyway, he's not a Phish fan. I've taken him to 2 Phish shows begrudgingly, and I've known him since we were in 4th grade. And a few months ago, he was on the street in New York, and he saw who he thought was Trey. He lives in New York, and he went up to Trey in Midtown and tapped him on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, are you Trey?" And Trey was like, "Yeah. Hey, man." And then Dave was like, "Cool. Do you know my friend RJ?" And Trey was like, and Trey said, "Yeah, of course." And Dave was like, "He's one of my closest friends from childhood." And Trey's like, "Oh, no way, man. That's amazing." And then Dave was like, "All right, anyway, have a good day. See ya." And he like walked away, which
This
is
is
just
the best Trey story ever.
amazing story. And the other night he was at a work event, and I don't know the guy's name, but he talked to a guy at this dinner. And if you're listening to this guy at the dinner, thank you. And Dave started talking to him and was like, "Oh, you're a music fan? Do you know Phish?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then started, he said that he'd known me for a long time. And this guy like went on and on about how much he loves HF Pod and how it like changes his perspective on the music, and he listens to Phish in a different way than he did before. And I just love hearing that from people. I feel like maybe we all sort of feel like we kind of know everyone who loves the podcast because we see people at shows and people email and call and tweet at us and all that. But it's nice to like know that there are people out there who we've never met who like find what we're doing to be interesting and inspiring. It's really awesome. So thanks, guy at the dinner with Dave.
Makes it worthwhile. That's awesome.
Yeah, truly. That's so special. I love hearing things like
okay. Reprise this week. Philly Thursday, Woodstock Friday, September 5th at Bridgeport, Connecticut. Megan and I will be there. Asbury Park, September 6th. I'll be there. So check out repriseband.com to get tickets to those shows. I think that the Woodstock show I'm going to next weekend is going to be awesome. Super excited about that. The Philly show is going to be amazing. So check those guys out. We are going to do a quick discussion of the book Northwoods at the end of this, a book that I just finished, and it's something else. Brian's holding it up.
So good.
We have a few we actually have a few questions to guide us. So we're going to do that at the end. Lastly, before we get into the actual show, we're doing a great job. Meg, what's going on with the moment with Meg?
Thanks, RJ. I'll be in Northlands this week. I'm going to go up and interview a bunch of people, and I'm really excited to do like a festival set of interviews. I have no idea how that's going to work, but just like everything with Moment with Meg, I'm learning on the go. So we'll see how it goes. I was also thinking it might be fun to talk to some people at the festival that are going to the festival, maybe check out some campgrounds. I don't know. We'll see. So I'm going to be around. If you see me, come say hi. And if you have ideas for people I should talk to or things you want me to talk about or ask about, just let me know. Reach out to me on socials.
Excellent. I'm excited to see how that goes. I know it's going to be great.
Yeah, me too.
That's
Okay.
cool.
Curious.
That's really cool.
Thanks.
Brian, let's just, I'm going to go to you first because we're talking about Fall 98, and Megan's going to obviously tell us what Fall 98 was in case we don't know or have forgotten. But this was ranked number 7 by fans, and it was ranked number 15 by us.
7.
And I just want to know, let's just get into it. Why is it ranked where it is by us and by fans, in your opinion?
I think by fans because it's 1.0 and the Dark Side of the Moon show was played during this tour. I think that there's a lot of I think also like just kind of expanding on it, a lot of fans who are still fans were at their kind of like apex of being
Totally.
both late high school, early college, early adulthood, seeing a ton of shows because they were playing that kind of same circuit year after year. The convergence of the internet with this culture that had kind of bubbled up organically throughout the 1990s kind of peaks at this point in time. They're playing venues that are big enough for kind of everyone to get in. Why is it ranked here for us? I think that it is a very thematic tour from a jamming standpoint and a very accomplished tour from a jamming standpoint. I think it has some really great moments. For me, it does not rise to the top 10 of the overall tours that the band has played. Let me just throw out 2 quick themes rather than like my definition, because I think this will better explain it and we can kind of jump off.
I have a theme too. I bet Megan does also. Let's do it.
Might.
To me, I hear This Is Fish as fully realized rock stars pushing back on the idea of rock stardom. Like at this point in time, like they book MSG on New Year's with ease now. They play arenas and amphitheaters, selling them out with ease. They're about to play a nearly 100,000 person festival. By all accounts, they're rock stars, but because they're outside of the mainstream, they have this ability to kind of push back on that. And I think that informs a lot of this tour, because this tour is not as arrogant as Fall 97. It's a bit quieter. It's a bit more introspective. And it's them kind of transitioning to middle age. But then the other thought is the idea of silence as an instrument. And that kind of aligns with what I was saying about like the pushing back on rock stardom. Like they're not embracing this big bombastic sound the way that you would think you would double down on after something like Fall 97, and they're leaning into this very introspective jamming. So there's a lot of nuance in there. I want to throw it to you guys and we can kind of keep going.
Megan, do you want me to do a theme or you want to do a theme first?
You go first. I'll go after you.
So I didn't remember how much I liked this tour until I started listening to it. And that was after, because Brian's 4 tours ahead or something. And it was after I knew that Brian felt the way he did. So I think I got even more excited to like it, knowing that Brian was slightly underwhelmed by it. So first of all, I think this is like chock full of jams, right? I think like we can talk about the jams and the nature of the jams and whether they're a little repetitive, but you get interesting and long jams in almost every show, and you get solid first set highlights, which I really appreciate. Like we talked about Fall 2013 last week, and I feel like Fall 2013 was like there wasn't a lot happening in those first sets, and like I guess looking at all these tours as part of this project, that is something that I look for whatever reason. I think the set list flow we should talk about, but to me this is like the end of the Machine Gun Trey era. Like I think this is
Mm.
the last time that you
Mhm.
hear him. So, but it's like it's the electro space insanity along with Machine Gun Trey and Fishman being
Yeah.
relentless. But like the last kind of hurrah of that era, which I
Yeah.
really love. Like there's so many jams in this tour where that just they're so fast and Trey is out front. But and then like the ambient stuff comes like later on in the jams, you know. So to me, it's like that those jams are a perfect combination of like Trey going insane, the tempos are really crazy, and then like melting into kind of space. So
Mm.
I
Mhm.
like it for that reason. Although I think you probably listen to like maybe 10 of the jams from the tour and kind of get that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the downside. But Megan, what do you think?
I loved this tour. I think it's awesome. I listening back, I just remembered how many of these jams I just absolutely love and how many just stopped me in my tracks. But it's not perfect and it's not consistent as some of the other tours we're talking about. And some of these shows are complete masterpieces and like the kind of edge of your seat fish that we all really want. The energy and the dynamics are like off the charts. I love the like druggy late 90s mixed with the fast kind of precise tightness of the early 90s. You can really feel that like kind of like coming together similar to what you're saying, RJ. There's like this overlap of two styles that are just like starting to meld in a really interesting way. And I think the commitment to exploration on this tour is outstanding. They're just so willing to go anywhere and be super quiet, and they're never in a hurry in a lot of these jams. It's really cool. But there's so many issues with setlist construction and inconsistencies. And RJ, offline, you were saying that the shows feel better kind of at the beginning of the tour than at the end, which is like the inverse of like what happens now, I feel like. And that's because they're like fresh and practiced and ready to go at the beginning of the tour. And then they've been partying hard for like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks in the later end of these shows. And they're not sloppy because I think they're still on top of their game enough to pull off just killer shows despite partying all the time. But you have those like really big peaks and then those also kind of just like mellower lows. And it reminded me of kind of like how I was in high school. Like I was a smart kid who did really well and like worked really hard and like was in the plays and like did everything really well. And then I started partying and realized at first, like, oh, I can do this. Like I can do both of these things and I could still do really well in school and I could still like crush it. I could still write a good paper, stay up all night. I don't need sleep. Like I can still go on stage and like rock a scene, even if I'm like a little bit less rehearsed than I used to be. And I think that's kind of where like 1998 Fish is right now. They're like realizing like we put in all the work. We get to party now. We're good enough that we can still like crush it and have these unbelievable moments of just like pure transcendence. But then we can also like fuck around a little bit and just wait in the space. And I think that really pays off when you have those like, it works with like a really droning ambient jam. It's cool if you're like kind of just fucking around in that, but it doesn't always work if you're trying to write a set list that makes sense and has flow.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I texted you guys, and I would love to just dive into this for a second, but I think of this tour, and I think the way you just laid it out, Meg, is brilliant. I think of this tour as the first 2.0 tour. It's just as
Mm,
Brian Weinstein just posted in the chat, the bill will come due eventually.
exactly.
This is they're coasting on talent. They know that they can get on stage and they can do
And
this,
hard work
and hard work, yeah, for the
that they
last
had done. Yeah.
10 years. Um, they know that they have the talent, and they also know that they've found this jamming style that doesn't require a ton of like quick changes or it's not very progressive rock anymore. It's more they're ambient. They're kind of inventing this you know they're like bridging almost like the rave and dance scene with jam music, which is going to blow up within the jam scene over the next 10 years with bands like Disco Biscuits, The New Deal, Sound Tribe, Sector 9, even a band like Galactic, or like where Humphreys McGee would go with their jamming. Like this is a style of music that is going to take over and permeate the jam scene, and it's all kind of starting with Fish, and it doesn't require as much effort as what they were doing in 1994 and 1995.
Agreed. Totally.
I see. I don't hear that. To me the
Yeah.
O2 is where the like I start to hear like the Coventry starts in O2 to me. That's when I start hearing that.
Hmm.
And the tour we're going to talk about next week is going to be like basically halfway there, or but with some
We're
weird.
all gonna flip on that one. I'm
Yeah, but
evangelical.
I
I
do
apologize in advance.
evangelical.
But
But I
no.
do
Go
feel like,
go
yeah,
go
I
on with
do
that,
feel like
RJ.
what you're saying, RJ, is I get that. Like, I think that like the covers that they're doing, like playing Sabotage and Tub Thumping, whatever that song is, in the same show, like to me, that's a little like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was. Well, I would
You
say
know,
Fucking
like,
around at this point.
yeah, like it's like a little lazy. Like it's a little like, you know,
Well, I do think that the things that you're describing, particularly the partying, do come into effect later on in the tour, and I think that's why the first part of the tour is super strong,
Yeah.
mhm.
and then the very end is super strong, which I think, to me, like those last few shows are probably
Totally.
there's probably a lot of partying happening there, and like the middle is kind of like it just feels like they're just getting through. Although there are some really, I think, really great moments in the middle, but yeah, I feel like I don't know. It's weird to me. I was at the Hampton shows. I think the Hampton shows are like the least good shows of the whole tour, which is just sort of funny. Like there's not a lot of improv. There's not a lot of like it's fun. They're fun and they were fun at the time, but there's like not a lot of music to go back to from Hampton, which is
Yeah.
sort of interesting. But
No, but that was my second Fish CD I ever bought. Maybe my
yeah,
third. I think I got Rift, a live one, and then Hampton.
it's
And
representative from that perspective.
it was the perfect way to get in to Fish as a total noob, because there's not a lot of
Wow.
deep jamming, so there's not a lot to like be kind of fearful of. Like when I saw a 30-minute tweezer on a live one, I was like, I don't know if I need to listen to that right now. It took me a little bit of time, but like I got a breadth of their catalog plus all these cover
Mhm.
songs that I knew. As a Chicago Bulls fan, Rock and Roll Part 2, regardless of like how weird Gary Glitter is, like that song that is coming out of commercial, Marv Albert talking about how the Bulls are making this big comeback. The Chicago Stadium is rocking and they're playing Rock and Roll Part 2, and Fish opens with that. It goes
I
to
know
the
that
tube.
is
Like
pretty sick. That is
that was
pretty
perfect.
sick. That is
But yeah, I
pretty
don't really
sick.
listen to that show at all anymore.
I
But
do
that
think,
album was huge. Like that
yeah,
went
it was a
gold. It was
big deal.
nominated for a Grammy. Like it was really, it was on the Billboard. It was like a big deal.
Grammy? It's so weird.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was the first night of Hampton or the first night of the Island tour, because they both opened with Tube, that Brad and I were on the floor pretty close, and we had written Tube on the back, on like the back of a part of a 24 pack of beer, and held it up, and then they opened with
Stop.
Tube, and we were super happy. And I don't remember if it was this show or 4298, but one of those happened. I think we
That's
were on the
amazing.
floor for both of those, but I don't think it had anything
I
to do
love
with our
that.
sign, actually. But
I love that for
um,
you guys. That's amazing.
I just
What
want
an
to say that I want to send out a note to our whole community and say, if you go back to one of these Fall 98 shows and you hear yourself talking while Fish is playing, and I'm thinking particularly of the 11-4 Frankie says, but also a lot of
Oh,
other points. If you hear yourself talking over Fish from Fall 98, you should write a letter to them and to all of us and apologize for your behavior, because you're old enough now to know better, and it's fine to reflect on mistakes. But I noticed a lot of that in like these quiet parts of the audience recordings that sound like really cool and interesting. And there's like, yeah, I don't know, there's interest rates might go down next year, so I'm thinking about like maybe, I might buy a house next year. But got to look at the school district. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, dude?
well, the partying
Serious?
that was going on stage and backstage was also going on in the
Yeah,
crowd.
how many of
So
those people were going between the front of the house and the
exactly,
back of the house?
Yeah, that's true.
Uh,
Yeah.
exactly.
Very quick side note, I went and saw Goose last night, and I had completely forgotten that Goose fans like to have full conversations about their social life and their dating life and apartments that they're looking at and investments and job opportunities during the show. And close friend of the pod, close friend of ours, someone you introduced me to, RJ, our good friend Kate, is the greatest person at breaking up people talking at concerts, and she came through in the clutch again last night. So if
Nice.
only there was Kate in Fall 98 going around and being
Uh,
like, hey, you're missing the show. The show's
she's great.
happening over here.
She's great.
We all
Hey,
need
Kate.
those people.
Yeah. Okay, Meg, do you want to give us a tour overview, or are we like, do we already kind of blow through that?
No, I'll do it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting the context a little bit that, they end the summer with Lemon Wheel, and then they spend the rest of August practicing for fall tour, which is interesting. They do the October Farm Aid, sit in with Neil Young, and then they play for his Bridge School benefit, which is one of my all-time favorite videos of Trey. Then the tour starts mid-October, 22 shows. Fillmore in San Fran, Shoreline, Greek, Vegas, where they will play the Halloween cover of Velvet Underground's Loaded, which would probably influence a lot of their songwriting on Farmhouse. The next night, Trey and Mike play at an open mic night at the Dead Goat Saloon in Salt Lake City for like 20 people. And the next night at the E Center, of course, they're going to cover Dark Side of the Moon because of lower attendance. Then they're going to play Denver, the Midwest. They're going to play a fantastic show in my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Can't wait till they play another Killer Haley's this year for us, RJ, when we go there. Then they go down to the Southeast. They play the Hampton shows, and the tour culminates in the Northeast. There are 91 jam chart entries, so over 4 jams per show, although I do think it's important to note that a lot of these jams are what our friend Jonathan Hart might call micro jams. A lot of them are like 9 minutes, but not to say that they're not good, but it is interesting what got charted on this list.
There's a lot of jamming.
Yeah.
I would also note to that the micro jam definition. It works when a 9-minute jam sounds like a 17-minute jam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of these sound like 9-minute jams.
Well,
Agreed.
that's
Kind of
just,
one
you know,
note.
Yeah.
that's just one person's opinion, you know.
Isn't everything?
I'm happy to stack them
Yes.
and see what happens here.
Yeah, let's talk about some representative jams, because
Yes.
I think
do it.
there are a lot. But Brian, given the dearth of jamming here, what do you look at here from this tour? What stands out to you?
So I do think that the big gems are really, really strong. And one of my notes
Mhm.
for this tour was that there are kind of scattered high quality runs scattered across uneven shows. And I think that applies to both the jamming and also like the Worcester run overall, I think is really, really high quality. But I would say one that just immediately stuck out to me and really hit me hard. I'd listened to it before. It's been praised, but like it never fully connected with me. And then I listened to it during this re-listen session. I was just blown away. And that's the 11-9 Bathtub Gin. It's just really, really connected. Rhythmic guitar playing from Trey. Amazing hi-hat snare work from Fishman. It kind of gets into the type of groove that Trey would reimagine and write with Russ and Tony for like Sand and First Tube, where it's really hypnotic and it kind of feels like a preview of 1999. It also has that melodic, just like shimmering shoegazy sort of guitar tone that Trey was playing with that I absolutely love. RJ rightly so, talking about how this is kind of the end of Machine Gun Trey in a lot of ways. Like it's a different Machine Gun Trey than we were hearing 2 and 3 years earlier, where it was about kind of aggressive peaking and just kind of melting faces. This is, I said it before, but it almost feels like a high peak on a slow dive song, or like a pretty My Bloody Valentine song, where it sounds like there's 10 guitars on stage playing like 6 effects. You know how like Siamese Dream, like the song Mayonnaise, just like sounds big and melodic and emotional, and it's like there's 80 guitars that Billy Corgan's playing at once. Like that's what some of these best moments of Trey and Fall 98 sound like, and I think it's really emblematic in this gin, which is, you know, a peak moment from a show and from a run that I think is special to a lot of fans.
I love that jam. It's so groove based, and then it gets so quiet. I just love
Yeah.
That's like so many of the jams of this tour have that that component, you know. I guess I just from that same run, I think that whole run should be released as a package.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that the middle show is like there's not much that happens, but the first night, AC/DC Bag, and I just want to talk about the journey of AC/DC Bag because I'm so proud of this song as it watching its growth and evolution. So like, you know, staple of Fish, obviously, and then we get really nothing of note from this song besides standard versions until Fall 97. Then we get like 2 outrageous versions in 97, 1121 and 1230. And then this, to me, this like the AC/DC Bag as a jam vehicle peaks in Boise in 99. And this like 11.7 version is an important one on that journey. It's got everything from Fall 98. It's got the ambient pieces, but it has like the drive, the upbeat groove, the quiet introspective section. The transition into Ghost as part of this 4-song second set is like,
Love that.
it's a real treasure of a set and of a
Totally.
jam. And this is like, to me, there's like, if you plot out AC/DC Bag, this is like one of the key versions of this song. On its way to Boise '99.
This
It's
is
just
a
it's a really
wildly
great.
adventurous version. It's so how it's like staccato at first and gets super wild and then becomes so contemplative. But when Trey finds that like really darkly hopeful kind of solo at the end, it's just, and it just melts into Ghost. Yeah. And this you can listen to because it's on Live Bait 9, I was really happy. Thanks to your spreadsheet, RJ, I was able to check that out.
We got six entries in Live Bait from this tour, including 2 from 11/7 and the Gin from 11/9.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that the other piece of 1.0 AC/DC Bag is the last piece is the Coventry version, probably the only good music to come out of Coventry of lasting value, in my opinion anyway.
I think there are a couple others, but it is the best, and the good stuff definitely rises above the really bad stuff. Whew. 20 years, 20 years. We're coming up on it. My God,
That's crazy.
What do you have, Megan?
So my favorite jam of this tour is actually from the Hampton run. It's the Simple from Hampton Night 2.
Wow.
It's so beautiful and spacious. It's delicate. It's searching, but not in a way that feels unfulfilling. Just that perfect, beautiful ambient space. It's the kind of jam I always want to hear. When I was listening to it, it felt like a precursor to those moments in the 12/30/19 tweezer where you're just floating and it's super blissful. I love also how it ends. The big drums for the wedge come out from under it. And that is just some perfect set listing right there. It's so satisfying. And this is my favorite jam of the tour. I loved it.
It's good. It's really good. And it
really good.
Getting the soundboard treatment is helpful, like it's just it really helps to highlight it. Brian, I want to go to, I think there are like 8 versions of Ghost from this tour that I think they're all kind of the same, but they're all awesome. And
oh my God, one is the best though.
One is the best. Well, we should figure out which one that is, because I think I wanted to give a shout out to the 11/11 Ghost, which we should talk about in detail. Okay. I just can't believe how slowly it starts.
Yeah.
It's like they could not do that now. There's no way they could play Ghost that slowly. But then I didn't mean to take your Ghost. Let me leave that to you and just talk about 11/15 real quick.
Take it. I have other ones.
No, we have to talk about 11/11 overall. So maybe I want to just mention the 11/15 Ghost, which is in the first set. It's not jam charted, but it's
weird.
got this. I know. To me, it like kind of summarizes everything about this tour that I love. It's got the like swirling effects, but also Machine Gun Trey. It's got the right mix of effects and kind of like playing. The tempos are nuts thanks to Fishman, and it's just got this like, I mean, it's a crazy. I feel like every Ghost this tour is just like wild.
So good.
Like, and this is like 16 minutes, and it feels like it should be on the jam charts, but it's not. But anyway, that version is one of my favorites. But there's so many from this tour.
The slow start, I mean, they had kind of nailed. It's really interesting how they took this song that the way it started in 1997 felt perfect for the cow funk era. It's very staccato, very angular, just like hits you and like you're suddenly in, and like the song is just like so herky jerky. And then a year later, when they've kind of figured out the soft edges of funk and fused it into ambient music, Ghost suddenly is now this eerie, kind of creepy intro and kind of grooves, and it's really rooted around Mike Gordon's bass, and then it builds off into like that summer has some amazing ghosts, the Shoreline one, the Lemon Wheel one, but then the fall these become kind of haunting in a really cool way.
Yeah, I agree. And that the 11:11 version, like we can talk about it when we talk about the show, but it's a funk masterpiece. And I think it perfectly displays what to me is a defining sound of this tour, which I'm jumping ahead, but is taking that funk and letting it kind of melt into those like ambient spaces. And this is a perfect example of that. It has that like spaceship landing at the end. It's so great.
I think this tour also, just to throw another gem out there, like from 11:15, the Waiting in the Velvet Sea. This is like where we get into the
Oh, yeah.
micro jams, but the back half of it just like
Mm.
employs ambient music over a song that is already a ballad in the middle of the second set. You know, a lot of people I think would say don't continue playing slow music here, but Trey's tone fused with the groove within the band, fused with the fact that like this band has been on the road without a break really since the late 1980s. Like they just instinctively know each other. And a song like this can just kind of unfurl in a way that feels really emotional. It feels really reflective based on the style of music that they're playing and the song that it's coming out of. And it just adds a little bit extra. And like I felt like that was scattered throughout the tour. Like there were a lot of moments, the 10:31 Sally, the 11:4 Frankie Says, the 11:11 Gumbo. And then this Waiting in the Velvet Sea, a few others out there as well, but like moments that wouldn't dominate a playlist but like really add to the color of the overall tour and kind of are these peak islands throughout it.
God, the last like 2 minutes of that are just some of the most beautiful music on this tour. It's so pretty.
It reminds me of like what we hear in Summer '99 with like Fee and Mango
Yes,
Song, where you get
yes.
like
Mm.
those extended jams out of songs that don't usually provide those. I want to just talk up quickly. I know that like we talked about kind of the second half of the tour being a little bit less good. There's the set two opening Wolfman's from 11:18 is to me like the kind of the maybe the most celebratory kind of jam from this tour. Kind of shows up out of nowhere, and it's just Wolfman's is huge like this whole tour, but there's like great kind of like just open improv, and then it goes into this like melodic celebratory jam, and then like go like smoothly into Lizards. That's a really great. I probably overlooked that particular segment in the past, but that's a really awesome part of this tour.
It's such easy funk. It's so like textured and unhurried. It's super groovy. It's just, and then has that like uplifting, beautiful ending. It's really nice. And I have to mention the 10:31 Wolfmans too, just because we're talking about Wolfmans. That is my second favorite jam from this tour. It's 30 minutes and it's after that loaded set, and you just hear like the release of that. And it's just such an exploration. It has so much freedom in it. And it's just so full of like effects and space and patience. And then there's just like this blues jam at the end that goes into Piper. That's a masterpiece, that jam.
That that is my favorite jam of this tour, and that is
Oh
when I
no, I
think
took
about no,
it.
no, 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 it's fine. It's a good that's a jam that like, I feel like people have talked about it endlessly, so we don't need to spend too much time on it. But like, I'll just say, like, when I talk about this tour being, in my mind, the start of 2.0, if you like extend it out, it's that because it's clear that the band is in a partying mindset coming out for that set.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know if they're in the right frame of mind to play a set of entertaining music after asking a lot of fans to sit through an album that most admittedly at the time had not heard. Um, but the depths that they find emotionally and musically in that 30-minute Wolfman's remind me of a lot of jams we're going to talk about next week in their intensity, in the willingness to just like nakedly throw out where they are at that point in their lives and in that moment. It feels very challenged, but it feels like music communicating kind of, a psychological battle that someone is having with themselves
Mm.
in music in front of 20,000 people. And it blows my mind every time I hear it. You're absolutely right. That like blues jam at the end, it sounds like 3 o'clock in the morning down a back alley. You like stumble across like, who the fuck is this guy? He's still
Yeah.
playing. Like there's blood coming out of his hands when he's like strumming. He's just like, he's been playing for like 8 hours. Trey's wearing that like Wolfman's mask for part of it. Like there's a video on YouTube, someone that held up their camera for the entirety of that. It's so worth watching, man. Like when the sirens are going, like the lights are just so
Yeah.
wild. So
Wait, I've never
I love
seen
that.
that. That's
Yeah,
amazing. I
it's
wanna see
good.
that.
It's good.
So, okay, well, let's talk about that Halloween show real quick because I think you get in that Halloween show, you get two versions of Fish. Basically, you get
Mm.
Yes.
the first set, like you mentioned that like the Sally Chalk Dust.
Mm.
It's like so sloppy. It's basically like kind of fall '97, but like more off the rails. And then the
Yeah.
Loaded set is kind of perfect. Like they play the songs way truer to like the originals than what they became later. You know. Like
Mhm.
they kind of did it a lot more to Loaded. Like rock and roll that they play now doesn't really sound like the version on Loaded, but this night it did. And like Oh Sweet Nothing with Paige putting everything into it, like
Mm.
amazingly focused band. And then they come on set 3 and it's just like they're just on drugs. I mean, there's no other way really to describe
Yeah.
There's no way to beat around the bush. Like they took
Right?
drugs, but during the set break and they were hitting very hard.
Yeah.
just
And they play
like
like a
I mean
3-song set that just fucking yeah.
Trey walks
and
off stage during
they
that
walk
ghost.
off. Yeah, they're like, I
Yeah.
mean, but then 2 nights later, I mean, this is first of all, like the 11-2 show, epic troll, like maybe one of the most epic trolls of
Yeah.
Fish's career. When we talk hyperbolically about Fish a lot about what they can do, but covering two really like complicated albums perfectly in back-to-back shows is it's pretty insane. It's
When
like
one of them is Pink
really
Floyd, like, come
yeah,
on. It's like,
it's
that's
just insane.
insane.
And I hadn't listened to the 11-2 show in a while, and the crowd reaction at the beginning of
Oh my
Dark Side of
god,
the
it's
Moon after Harpo. It reminds me of like Terrapin Station in '98 with that show that I was at, where like everyone just like lost their mind. I mean, it's such a but those two shows back to back are kind of funny, you know. I don't know. They're like juxtapositions of each other, but also within 1031, you basically get two different bands. Like it's almost like Fish like sat back in between the first and third set and had like a cover band play Loaded, and then they came back out for set 3. Like it just
right.
doesn't. It sounds like a totally different band.
It's amazing, right? Yeah. Well, it just goes to show when they want to lock in, they can pretty much do anything they want.
Yeah.
Well, I think to Megan's point earlier, the Loaded set seems to help inform where a lot of their songwriting is going to go. It's a little bit more of like when you think of especially Remain in Light 2 years earlier and how much that impacted the 97 shift. But
Mhm.
Quadrophenia is just like bombastic and huge and like, can we be an arena rock band? But like Loaded just feels like 10 really well crafted songs with some diversity, but like just really well crafted songwriting. It doesn't feel like it's overly complicated in terms of learning those songs and executing on them. And as a result, they kind of blow those songs out. Every one of those songs, aside from Who Loves the Sun, is twice as long as it is on the album. And you get like actual jams and Lonesome Cowboy Bill and Rock and Roll. Like it feels just like they internalized that album and it has defined a lot of their
Mm.
approach in the years since. One quick thing about the Dark Side of the Moon set. I remember hearing during Festival 8, apparently they had a video screen where they were playing archive video footage of old Fish performances, a lot
Yeah.
of which have not surfaced since, but one of them was the Dark Side of the Moon set. And Brian Weinstein says it here in the chat. It's cliche to say, but the crowd reaction at times still
Yeah.
gives me goosebumps. Apparently, there were people in the crowd who thought that they were just going to do Speak to Me, Breathe, On the Run, and then go back into Harpua. Because why would you play the whole album? Like you're already 35 minutes into the second set. And when they played Time, the whole crowd realizes like, holy
Yeah.
shit, we're getting the full album. And apparently at Festival 8, I guess they had it at Super Bowl too. Apparently at Festival 8, though, people were watching this, and I remember hearing like that the entire place started screaming along with the crowd on the screen. Like it's just one of those
Oh,
moments
I
that
love
every one of
that.
us just loses our mind.
Yeah, that is incredible. I think it's almost even better than when they first start playing it because they realize like we're going deep. It's
We're
so
getting the
cool.
whole thing.
I just want to make a quick comment that Tom and I interviewed in 2018 Justin Bolognino, who's a friend of mine, who did he produced that video that they played at Festival 8. And
Cool.
Tom and I interviewed him about it and all the work that went into it, and it's on the
Very
Osiris YouTube page, but it's called Festival 8 Revisited. But yeah, pretty wild. Okay, let's take a quick break. We've already started talking about shows, but we need to take a break for our obligations, and then we'll keep talking about a couple more shows. All right, Brian, what other show do you want to tell us about?
Well, I just want to say that Swiatek is up 6-2. It looks like she's going to run away with the French Open. She is just the most dominant force in women's tennis. And if it were not for Coco Gauff, she would be my absolute favorite women's tennis player. But let's go, Iga. Let's go. Shows. So you guys have mentioned this. I think it's absolutely right. I have 3 shows from the first half of tour and 2 shows from the last 3 shows of tour, and nothing in between there in terms of like what I think is our representative shows. I'm going to save one because I love you guys and I want to give you guys one. And I'm going to go with a potentially unpopular pick, the left of center choice, if you will, because I'm just obsessed with doing what is not expected of me.
Good.
And that is the tour finale, 11/29, 1998. This is a show that I don't know if it's ever been panned, but I don't feel like it's really been celebrated the way that 11/27 is.
Yeah.
And I think that when I got to this point in the tour, I was just kind of like, okay, I just got to listen to a couple jams, just get through this. I'm almost done. And I was on this like committed listening project to getting ahead so that I can listen to new music plus follow Goose all in advance of Phish Summer Tour. It's all mapped out. Like I have spreadsheets for what I can listen to each week, and I cannot break that. But then I listened to this show and I was like, man, this whole show like has highlights scattered across it. You've got Paul and Silas, Axela, which has the Axela 2 ending at the point in time when they were not playing Axela 2. Theme from the Bottom, Sparkle, Horn. Huge first set highlight with Limb by Limb into Catapult, into Kung, into Maze. And then All the Pain Through the Years and Layla debuts with Seth Iacovone on guitar and vocals, which is just a cool way to end the set. Set 2, Roses, a really, really cool simple. Like a really cool simple. Makasupa that pokes fun at Paul Languedoc for getting arrested. Possum Wipeout, really good gin. You Enjoy Myself, and then encore of Megan's favorite song, Rogue or Roger, depending on who is on this podcast.
There's only one way to say it.
Yeah, I think we've settled that,
There's
right?
only one way to say it.
How do we say it?
Rogue.
Okay, thank you. I said it correctly originally. And Hell of My Baby to end it. Like Hell of My Baby, a cappella song I wish that they would bring back a little bit more. I don't know. It's just like packed. It's got good flow. It's got some fun parts. It's got some random parts. It's got some deep, deep jamming. I really dug this show. And I thought, we've already released 11/27. 11/28 is, so why don't we get 11/29 as one of our live Phish releases?
Yeah.
And why don't we recommend it for the listeners?
It's on my list of releases.
I love that. Limb by Limb is so cool. Into like Catapult and Kung. Like that is so sick. Imagine if they dropped like that today. People would lose their minds. But yeah, I think that part is so cool. And to do it in the first set is also very cool. And the fact that they still have ideas at the end of the tour is pretty cool. But that encore kind of sucks. Let's be real.
I was thinking
like
that
if they came out to encore Rogue, I would literally be like fucking out. Like
you could do what I did last night at Goose when they started Dawn, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna go use the restroom. I'm gonna fill up my water, and I'm gonna get out of here before traffic. And actually, like I appreciate Goose throwing the SOS jam in that slot. So that's what Phish would have done for you.
Exactly.
So,
I would have been able to.
I want to
leave
just,
on time.
Brian, about that show. I just want to comment on one thing, which is the simple in the second set. I do wonder if some of these like lower key space jams are a little bit more prevalent as the tour wears on, and they're a little bit more like they're just more worn out. But this simple turns into like a haunted house toward the end, and like the effects and the swirling, they go on for like a really long time, like longer. Like to the point where when you're listening to it, you're like, wait, is this still happening? That's a really, and the Jin is representative of the tour, I think, driving, soaring, and then like ambient. It's a really good show to cover sorry, to close the tour. I really liked it.
What do you got?
Well, I think that 10:30 is slightly overlooked because of the next two shows. I think
Hmm.
for an almost, opener, I think the tour opener is fine at the Greek in LA, but 10:30 show, there's a lot going on. There's a really good Antelope in the first set. But the second set is Stash into Manteca, into Tweezer, into NICU, into one of those jams that we were talking about that we'll see more of in 99, into Caspian and Golgi closer. But the Tweezer is, and a lot of this is released as filler on the 1031 Live Fish, so a lot of it's out there. But the Tweezer is one of those focal points of the tour for me. Like the soloing is like it's got like the washes of sound and the reverb and heavy effects, filters, whatever Trey's doing, but it also is like raging and really fun. And the NICU into the jam, that's like one of those moments, like the waiting later in the tour that you guys were talking about. I think it's a really good show that's like a little bit overlooked, except for I think people like you talk about the Tweezer, but because Trey is raging, but I think the rest of the show is a little overlooked.
I remember when the 4 Halloween shows were released on Live Fish, and I went in really excited to hear 94 and 95 because the Beatles and the Who, and I came out thinking 96 and 98 were the two best performances, and part of it was this filler that was added to the 98. I don't think I would have engaged with this show at that point in time. I wasn't like looking to trade for it, so it was kind of just like, oh cool, bonus fish. Man, that is like one of the most smooth. If they played like 4 more second sets like this, I think that this tour gets a ton more universal praise. It's like
Yeah.
this 11-7 and 11-9 to it, or excuse me, 11-11 to a degree, as these like fall 97-esque second sets where it's just fully fluid, just jams bleeding into other jams, and you have that scattered across that tour in a way that it's a little bit more isolated here. But man, this is just an uninterrupted segment of total gold. Great stuff. And also proof that like this tour in soundboard quality is so elevated because there's so many nuanced sounds. We'll talk about it when Meg eventually talks about 11-11, but like there's one gem in particular that like I never paid attention to, and then I heard it in soundboard and I was like, oh my God, it's like I'm hearing like 16 different sounds I hadn't heard before.
Well, I do wonder about that, if these shows would sound better and if this tour would sound better if more of it was released.
Yeah.
Because
I think this is
agree.
one of those biggest beneficiaries of soundboards.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that, sorry, just to Megan, before I pass it to you, I do think, and Brian from Tenants Bias is saying that same is true for 99 2000.
Totally.
I'm sort of amazed at how shitty the audience tapes are from 99. I mean, thank you, tapers,
really bad,
for
yeah.
everything. But like, especially the shows leading up to Big Cypress, which are incredible. And like, there's so many moments. And now they're like slowly releasing some of them. But like, I don't know what it was, if it was just like the sound in the arenas had changed, or maybe the technology for taping hadn't like caught up. But like some of those shows, and again, I appreciate the effort because otherwise we wouldn't have the shows, but it just like some of these like fall 98, it's like, oh God, like
It's
I
hard to
think
hear.
we'd think of this tour totally differently if we had a full soundboard.
I really wonder too, because personally I prefer to listen to Fall 97 and the Island Tour in audio or in audience taping. I just think that like whoever was taping during that period captures the room really, really nicely, while also funk, I just think, sounds a little bit better in that kind of slightly distant reverby type of way. Whereas these jams, you really need like a headphones and like a close listen. It's just, it's not designed for distant listening at all. I don't know.
It was probably a lot harder to tape, just the way they play with dynamics on this tour is so different. And they hadn't really been doing that yet. So, they're learning
how do you
on
adjust?
the go. Yeah,
That's
you're
true.
adjusting to like them. You think about like the Weekapog from like 11-27, where Trey's like, fucking at the top of like the sound is so big, and then you think of like the Simple, from Hampton, where it's so quiet. Like they're changing a lot as far as taping levels and stuff. I don't know anything about taping, but I assume that'd be challenging.
What do you guys make of this set 2 from 11-27? Like, what do you think the story is here? Because like something there's a story. I mean,
It's such a masterpiece.
It's a fucking party that just works. We
Yeah.
talked about this when
Yeah.
we had this for the 98 40 for 40 show. This is 1993 Fish meeting Party Rockstar 1998
Yeah.
Fish. It is just
Oh my God.
no holds bars. The fact that you get jamming and total rarities and they're all segued together, fucking brilliant.
It's
Occam's
just one of
razor
those
situation.
Yeah, it's like it's just like this is the edge of your seat Fish, like the best moment of that on this whole tour. It's thrilling. It's like that perfect balance of like being really playful but taking it really serious. This is a chance when like things like Wipeout and Mirror in the Bathroom like work. They don't sound like you're just throwing like tub thumping in an encore. You're actually like finding them in the moment and just like committing so hard, and you can hear them. Like, I love watching the video of this set when they're like looking at each other and they find that mirror in the bathroom and they're like, yes, like this is so fun. And I think this whole set just feels like one of those magic rides where like you're just like lucky to be along for it and everything's just like falling perfect. Brian, it's like you often say, like sometimes it doesn't matter what they play, and this is definitely like one of those sets. And this Mike's Groove is unfucking believable. Like it's unbelievable. Like the mics is so good. Trey's, they are so in the pocket. They're just doing all those like spacey textures and Trey's like floating above it. It's like druggy and drifting, but like in a good way. It's not in like that way that feels lazy. And then they have that beautiful hydrogen that has like that crazy spacey segue into it. But then the Weekapog is like, I mean, it's like double time, which Weekapog is
Yeah.
already like a really fucking fast song. It's so funky and it's just they're in Wipeout, and it's so great. It's just so fun. This is an unbelievable set of Fish.
They like caught some magic, during this set.
Yeah.
It feels like one of those sets. Like there were a bunch from Fall '95, which maybe we'll talk about at some point. But there are these points where it just like feels like there's just something crazy happening. And I want to say that Buffalo Bill, I texted you guys this, will never not be funny. I think that Tom's told the whole story somewhere on a podcast, but I mean the way that the lyrics work based on the story is just, it's amazing. And if you don't know the story, just look it up, because the first line of the song is so perfectly Tom based on the story that he's told about how it came about. That you guys have heard the story, right? It exists out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
I just like, I love that in the middle of a weird set. It's so perfect. Megan, do you want to talk about the best show of 1998 that's not from the Island Tour?
Well, I mean, I wanted to, but now
Whoa.
since Brian said I was going to, I kind of don't want to anymore. It's a little bit like I actually want to talk about my other shows that I was thinking
Okay,
about talking about,
please.
just as like kind of like a fuck you. But
Do it.
I mean, I definitely
It's
want to
your
talk
world.
about 11/11, and we will get to it. But one show that I think is underrated that I really loved was 11/4 from Denver. And I think playing this show after, what they just played in Salt Lake is like so unbelievable. But this show actually has a really nice flow, really great gin, really great Yamar. And one of the first extended Frankie says, it's only like 9 minutes, but it's really great. And then it fades into Bowie, and it's such a good build to that Bowie. When Bowie drops, it's like so satisfying. And the Bowie has some like nice moments and really nice space, and then it peaks wildly. Really great set closer. And I think set 2 has really great flow. Again, you've got a really extended rocking Jim, great Piper, an incredible jam, really solid playing, groovy funk, and a really great 2001. I think the show is underrated. And it was one of those shows where, clearly I didn't have time in our 5 days of prep to listen to 22 shows. But this is one that I didn't turn off. Like I couldn't skip ahead. I was like, I'm just going to keep listening. I really like the show.
Great show. The Piper, I think, has some of this like what you hear in the Miami 12:29:03 version, just sick
Mhm.
shredding from Trey, and
Yeah.
like it slows down, but he just like won't stop playing guitar, and it's a good show.
A show that had the great misfortune of following 11/17/97 1 year earlier and 11/2/98 2 nights earlier. So I think destined to be underrated, and I think you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. It has a lot more there. I think that this is one of those expectations gets the best of us from time to time. From everything I've ever read, people left Vegas and went straight to Denver because Denver was going to be the show based on what happened a year earlier. Fish loves Colorado. That's why so many people skipped Salt Lake City. They do the Dark Side of the Moon thing in Salt Lake City. They play a Fish show in Denver. Nothing like blow your brains out, like just like that's very aggressive. Nothing that will blow your mind, but like but like when you listen back out of context of the tour, the really, really strong points of the show emerge, like you're talking about.
Agreed. But we do
Well,
have to talk about 11:11.
Yeah, I was gonna say
It
for
has your
having that
favorite
much
jam
to
of the
say,
tour.
and one of my top 10 jams of all time. I do keep track of them, and this show does have one of them. Megan, before I think this should be the last thing we talk about. Can I just do like a
Mhm.
very quick shout out to like four things?
Yeah, do it.
Really quick jams that we probably won't talk about. 11:13, which is the show I was at. Wolfman's with the Mind Left Body jam is really
Yeah.
great. And then the meet into Hood from that show, which has like the
Yes.
looping sirens at the end.
Yeah.
It's really funny, really weird. I don't know where I slept that night before going to Cincinnati the next night, but I went to both of those shows, and I had to leave the Cincy show early because my girlfriend is my high school girlfriend. She had a ganja goo ball in the parking lot, and it was
No.
those things were like 50-50. It's like they either
Girls
didn't
shouldn't
work at
do that.
all.
There was like too much in there for like women's bodies or something.
Yeah,
You
but
gotta keep
sometimes they
away
just
from
didn't
this.
work at all.
Yeah, no, it's true.
They
You
either
never
like
know.
didn't work at all, or you like had to go
Or
home.
they
So
crushed
anyways,
you. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I want to mention those 11:13 jams. I think the 11:24 Ghost has another like really kind of electric, space
Yeah.
funk version. I really, really like that. But and that show has an actually good possum. So I think there's like there's a
There's
couple
some good
highlights throughout. Sorry, Megan. Go. What
No.
about 11:11?
Well, it has two of the best jams of the tour, bookending the second set, which is just phenomenal. But it also has so much more. It has like the classic 90s opener and Punch You, a jammed out gumbo, gorgeous, perfectly played Tila, great birds, which is on the jam chart. I mean, it's just wild 1994, ripping Birds of a Feather. And then this Haley's, which is unbelievable, one of your favorite jams of all time. It's 24 minutes. It's so pretty and so incredible how Trey just dances over everything the whole time. There's just that wild space at the end. The Page is like bringing the drama, the piano, incredible. You've got really incredible piano from Page as well on Simple. And then this Limb by Limb is just really, really great. Incredible dramatic peak, fun breakdown. And then one of my favorite jams of the tour, this Ghost. And then you've just got like this end, which is really fun too. Like the Contact has like the organ funk, really like throwdown feels, just so much energy. And I love right before Funky Bitch, you hear Trey go like, just one more. Like, yes, like Trey doesn't want to leave. Like this is the energy they're going to bring to Grand Rapids this summer when I see a show 30 years after I first saw Fish in the same town. I can't wait.
Grand Rapids, deeply underrated and overlooked Midwestern gem. I went there for the first time about 10 years ago and absolutely fell in love. This show rules. I'll just quickly talk about the gumbo because this is what exemplifies why this entire tour, much of this tour, should be released on soundboard. You listen to this in audio and it just sounds kind of like a 13-minute groove-based gumbo, and then you listen to it in soundboard quality. And there's so much that Page is doing under the register to drive the jam forward in really subtle ways. And it just makes it clear that like the silence, the dynamics that they were playing around with were really intentional and that they were experimenting at a really high level still. The partying is getting a bit extreme. My feelings notwithstanding of like this, kind of starting to shift towards the 2.0 era, there's still, when they walk on stage, they're trying to accomplish something. They're trying to communicate on a very high level that has always been the persistent goal. And like, to me, is Fish at their absolute best.
Yeah, that's like a really melodic ambient jam, which I feel like is hard to do. It's really pretty.
Yeah, I mean the Haley's is Fishman is on the tempo the whole time. There's a bunch of dynamic changes where it slows down and then it becomes more funky. Page gets on, then he backs up, and then Trey gets back, and then like it goes through so many different phases, and that's one of the things I like about it. To me, it's similar to the Riverport gin from
Yeah.
earlier this year, you know, where it's
Mm.
just like it never slows down, but it's super high octane, and then it like kind of goes into this funky thing, but it never slows down. Fishman, for however many minutes, just never stops the tempo, and then they
Yeah.
just like they kind of slam into the simple at the end, which I think is fine, but there's this like spacey weird ending and then into simple. It's just an adventure. It never slows down, and I love it. I love this jam so much.
It's incredible.
Oh, yeah, it is hypnotic and grooving and like a high octane all at once. It had to be so much fun to play because it does not sound like the hardest music, but it sounds like a band that's just like fully connected. And Trey
Mm.
is almost like, let's just not stop this groove ever.
Yeah.
Like they sustain the same groove for like 8 or 9 minutes because why would you stop it?
Why would you stop? Really? Okay. So any takeaways from this tour? We kind of we did a bunch up top, but what do you guys got?
I have one I'd like to share. I had more to say about this tour than I thought going in, which, you know, is just
Shocking.
my entire life,
Shocking.
right?
What's-
It's more of a question, and it's one that we'll never get an answer to, but I would just like to pose it in this conversation. I feel like by the time Fish came back in the late 2000s, there had been this pretty significant cultural shift that getting fucked up and playing rock shows was no longer cool. And it was
Mm.
something that still lingered in the late 90s that like a rock star had to kind of be a party animal as well. You know, like a couple of years later, we're going to get Almost Famous where, you know, the fake band Stillwater, like their demise is the same way that like every 70s rock band is demise. It's like cocaine and booze and groupies hanging around
And
and it all just
infighting
like
and
infighting.
ego.
It builds and builds and builds and everyone's on drugs and whatnot. And like Fish kind of got to this stereotypical place by the late 90s, early 2000s, but by 2009, it was much more accepted. And like the band still had to like work through who are we as a clean band, but it was much more accepted. And like by now, like I think it's pretty well established that like if you're not necessarily sober, but like if you have your like priorities in place that the art and the music is what comes first, that is cooler than the partying side of it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder what it would be like to have this era of Fish meet like if the health forward focus in rock music came a decade earlier and how that would have impacted Fish. Because Fish at this point is just a little bit younger than where I am right now, but like far more successful. And that like battle
Depends how you look at it,
between
really.
Yeah. I don't know
it,
about
it
that.
I mean, okay, sure, whatever. I'm not nobody's coming to see me play at Worcester for 3 nights in a row. Come on.
Because you haven't booked it
Um,
yet.
That's a
Yeah.
good
And
point.
a
That's a good
shit
point.
ton of people are listening to you on HF Pod right now, but it's
What a
okay.
great way to announce our live show at the Worcester Centrum. No.
We're going to
Um,
Red Rocks.
We're doing it, man. Live
but
show.
like I just wonder, like, you know, for them at this point in time, like this fusion of all this success, still being slightly young, but like starting to move into middle age. They're all young dads, and the culture is about just like party, have a really good time, like continue to like you know dig into that side of things. Like if the focus in larger rock music was more health focused, I do wonder how that would have impacted them at this point in time. So it's an unanswerable question, but that was my big takeaway listening to this.
RJ, how about you? I'll go last.
To me, this is like I guess I sort of said this at the beginning, and maybe similar to what Brian was saying, but slightly different earlier. That was a long way of saying something that's confusing, but to me, this tour is like the end of an era. This is the end of
Yes.
this like like you both said, kind of like precise. You know, I kept saying Machine Gun Trey era. In 99 and beyond, we go back to kind of like vamp based full band jamming. 99 all about the groove, which is great in a different way, but there are so many jams in this tour that are just so fast, and with Trey playing so relentlessly, that I feel like this is the last tour where we really see that. Until, I mean, until arguably like 2021, but I don't know. We'll decide whether we think that he's ever not that precise, but in terms of like Trey being out front and just being interested in soloing to the point where you're like, Jesus, is he ever going to stop? Which
think
we
you're
all
right.
really
I
love.
think you're right about that. I think that like sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but like I just want to back you up. Like
If you're going
I
to cut
think
me
you're
off by saying I'm right, then like we're cool.
That's good, man.
No, but I think that's a really good point, and I think that like that's something we slightly explored last week in fall 2013, and we have a few more tours that are between fall 2013 and 2021 where the band is playing really well, but that magic of Trey being able to compose an idea that is sustained over however many bars of music doesn't really happen much past this.
Hmm.
It doesn't really. There's some 99 moments, but they're much more.
Yeah.
They're much more. They're like melodic over a groove as opposed to based on tempo. That's my take anyway.
Totally agree
Yeah.
with that.
Megan, what do you got?
I think that all the hard work laying down the foundation and evolving has really paid off for the band by fall 98. And now they can party and play and still mostly be amazing, but not always. But when they are amazing, it's going to blow the roof off. I love the word that you used, RJ, offline. You called some of these moments of this tour explosive. And I so hear that. Like they're just really explosive moments, just explode out the gate. And so my takeaway is that they're still good enough to fuck around and find out.
I love it. That's a great last word. Okay. Next week, we are going to be back. We're bringing you a Father's Day spectacular for all the dads out there. We're going to be talking about the number 14 tour of all time. And this one, if you're not watching live, I'll tell you, Brian is excited about this one.
This like aligning with Father's Day is just like too much for Brian. It's just like too good. It's too good. This is like your gift for Father's Day.
I will say that just as like a slight kind of peek behind the curtain for everybody, we'll release this eventually, like maybe at the end of the series, but this is the last tour that does not fall into the top 20 on both the fan vote and our vote. There's been a lot of fluctuation. Once we get to 14-1, that we're kind of like all aligned in some way, but this one was ranked number 27 by fans and number 14 by us, and a tour that admittedly for me I've gone back and forth on a lot throughout the years, and it has a couple of my favorite jams of all time, but also it's a weird one, and we are going to be talking about summer 2003, Brian.
I have re-listened to this so many times, and I have more to. I don't know how we're going to do book club next week because I have almost 2 hours worth of notes. One thing I will just say, just as a preview, what I just talked about, that like health focus approach. This is the first tour where the band tries to employ that to great success, although it does not splinter out to the remainder of the era, which is part of the dichotomy and part of the challenge of it. But I would personally argue, and I'm just going to leave you all with this going into it, this is one of the top 5 Phish tours of all time. So I'm coming with that energy.
So underrated on your terms.
Deeply, unforgivably underrated.
It has. I will. The only thing I'll say is that it has one of my top 10 jams of all time, and that's maybe Brian probably thinks it should have a lot more than that, but it's gonna be interesting.
I'm really curious to know which one it is now. Don't tell me until next week. I'm just gonna try to.
Yeah, don't.
It has one of my favorite as well, but plenty of others. Yeah, we'll get into it. It's good stuff.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. We're gonna do a quick discussion. We are gonna keep it quick, maybe 10 minutes. Of this book that we're going to get into right now. This is and spoiler alerts, anytime we're going to talk about a book, we're going to talk about things that, you would find out if you read it, and you might not know otherwise. So, Brian, you read this book first, Northwoods, which I think it was really, really interesting and very different from the book we talked about last week, Bee Sting. Almost, I think, different in that it almost feels like Bee Sting, as we talked about, we knew exactly what was happening, and we were like worried and excited reading and watching the things happen that we knew were inevitable. Whereas in this book, I didn't really know what was going to happen, and it was like very creepy and weird and interesting. I don't know. It's like a very very good and interesting book. But Brian, can you? I'm going to ask this first question, and if you choose not to answer it, that's fine, and you could answer a different question. But this, there's a haunted kind of aspect of this, and there's sort of in this book, there's the best and worst of human behaviors and experiences. There's
Mhm.
love and murder and madness and envy and generosity, all kind of like scattered throughout. And we should say that this novel kind of follows, instead of following characters through different settings, it follows the same setting through different characters. So those two aspects of it, the kind of like range of behavior and human experience that it reflects, and the way the story is structured, are really pretty unique. And I think part of what just kind of like made me think this book was really interesting and unique.
Yeah, I I took a lot of the same thoughts out of it. I think ultimately for me, what really drew me to this book is a lot of what's drawing me to a lot of the books I read and listen to nowadays, which is a better understanding of America as a place and as an idea. And I think that this book does a really a unique job of describing how much possibility there has been within this land for so many generations, but also the uh, the kind of deal with the devil we've made based on how we have treated original inhabitants of this land, people that we have brought to this land, as well as the land itself. And I feel like the ultimate message of this book is that the land will endure, the land will win out, and the people are almost insignificant in that sort of standpoint. We're a part of the story, and some of us have a greater impact on the story than others. Um,
Mm.
and like the thing I love the most about this book is you get, aside from a few characters, you really don't get anything other than you're dropped into this singular experience this person is having based on this home in rural Massachusetts that has been built and added on to and left to decay and then re-energized in so many different ways over 400 years. And so you get to know these people and their relationship to it, but you get this sense as you're reading the book that these characters don't necessarily matter as much. What matters is ultimately the setting. And it's just, I've never read a book like it. It's almost the inverse of the bee sting, where like there are certain themes of the bee sting that were reflected to me in this book, and reading the bee sting after this, like I got a sense of like I felt like I was almost reading like a different perspective on similar books at various times. But the bee sting is so interested in who these people are and why they do this and why they matter in the setting. Northwoods it doesn't care at all about the people. It just cares about how the land ultimately endures and wins out.
Megan, I think I texted you sometime during the book and said, like, is it true that this character didn't get mentioned in this other section? I think both of you were like, I don't remember at all, because it's not really about the
Yeah.
characters, right? It's like, I don't know. What's your take on how, like, a character driven book, which is, I would say, most books really, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Overstory, in that, like, we're kind of like
Yeah.
looking at it slightly from the perspective of the land, not the people. But even that book had like a lot of, prominent characters. I don't know, what do you make of this, like the way the characters versus setting are kind of dealt with?
Well, I think Overstory is more concerned with the actual story, and this story is more concerned with like emotion and this idea of intuitiveness and what Brian was speaking about the land being ongoing despite what we do to it and what we do to each other, and also thinking about us as animals and us as humans and how we may exist in this world and how we may exist in another world after. I found it to
Mm.
be super romantic. It's got all the things that I love and a great piece of art. It's really thought provoking. It has really deep world creation. It's really fun and enjoyable. There's some really funny moments. I think about that scene with the seance that's just, it's like so theatrical and large and big and lush. And it really taps into deep emotion too. And it talks a lot about memory and intuition and how, we all have this deep sense of knowing. And as animals and as part of this earth, we have it, but we have moved so far away from it. And I think you see in the earlier chapters, in the earlier sections, that humans like 400 years ago had more of that, right? They lived on the land, they lived more like within the land. And now we're more separated from that. And what I loved was this full circle moment at the end where the characters become part of the land again as part of their kind of afterlife, and how they get to inhabit the world, the natural world, and what they loved about it. And they get to be with the people that they loved, whether or not they were with them in the real world or not. And it was this really kind of like ultimately hopeful idea of the afterlife that to me was really inspiring and exciting. And I hadn't really thought about it in terms of having to do with nature in a way that you do here. And the last chapter of this book is so unique and just such a dream to me. It tapped into this emotion for me that I had a hard time kind of articulating, because it is a lot about what we want and desire and dream for in life, but ultimately can't have, or ultimately don't know how to get, and finding that in the afterlife, and how this character kind of finds that way to be who they wanted to be in this afterlife is just so magical. And the way that all the stories fit together like a giant puzzle. It's I've been thinking so much about structure when I've been reading this year, reading books like The Things They Carried or The Bee Sting or this book. These authors structure their books in really incredibly complex and original ways, and it just made me think so much about writing and how writers tell stories and what order they choose to tell things in. And this book is woven so beautifully. And there's a part in the ending where they say, the author writes, the only way to understand the world as something other than a tale of loss is to see it as a tale of change. And I found that to be just so powerful and moving and beautiful. And I think that's kind of what this book is all about, is that like, we ultimately think that so much of our lives are about us or about small things that we're going through, but it's really when you can step back and view things from this like larger, I don't know, it's almost like they're looking down on this piece of land and viewing it, through this larger scope of like time and passing of time. And it makes you feel really inconsequential, but then also lucky to be alive and lucky to have all of the feelings that you have. I don't know. That's kind of going off, but this book really blew my mind and really, I don't know, it just was interesting to me. It's also about a place that I know really, really well. I bought a house in Massachusetts right where this book takes place 17 years ago. And it was on a piece of land in the middle of the woods, that in a house that had been kind of like left. And as I've been slowly building that place up, it was just like this. And I remember like thinking about if it was worth like tearing the house down and starting over. And I realized like I didn't want to do that because there've been so many stories told in that place and so much energy there that I felt like that was wrong to do. So the whole time I was reading this book, I was just thinking so much about the land there and what it feels like for me to be there. And it was really magical. And I definitely recommend this book. And everybody should read it. It's really cool, really interesting. What did you think, RJ?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the good, like the supernatural aspect of it was like not the focus, but was much more about what you described as like basically if you like fuck around with this land, you're gonna like what you said at the end of the episode, like you fuck around and find out, if you're gonna like mistreat people and the land and all that, like it's gonna come back on you, whereas like if you're like
Hmm.
you're someone, if you appreciate, it's almost like the characters that like appreciated all the things you were just describing, they were treated better by the spirits and like previous occupants of the house, and those who didn't kind of got screwed, which I think is like,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting. It's almost like I don't know, like the land had its own designs on how to treat people. And um I don't know, the supernatural part of it was interesting to me. I thought it was like kind of like not cheesy, but it was like very obvious, but in like a way that worked, you know? It was like,
Mhm.
and now all the ghosts are gonna like come out and but it worked. I think the way that they played with that with regard to the land is really interesting and probably does justice to a lot of the things you were talking about, Brian, with like just the way that all the land that we live on in this country is not ours, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and I think also it speaks to something Meg said about structure. Like, I think that Daniel Mason, who wrote this book, who's a physicist and an author, and like there's definitely a scientific element to this
Yeah.
book in terms of the way that he describes plant life and the way that he just like um, there's a really amazing segment on psychology and on schizophrenia that like he just definitely has like more of a scientific brain approaching
Yeah.
fiction that I think lends itself to the structure. But you know, you there's a lot of shifts in tone as you're reading the book, and so when you start a new chapter you don't totally know, and there's these like segments that read almost as poetry or read kind of as just like free writing to an extent. There's a lot of letter writing throughout it, so like structurally he's taken a lot of big risks. It never feels showy, which I think is
Mhm.
really interesting. A lot of the time, it would be like, "Oh, cool, you can write in this style, so here's that segment." Um, this never, this all, it all feels intentional, and it feels like, whereas like the Bee Sting was 643 pages of like sprawling madness, where you go down like 6, 7
Yeah.
pages of ideas around like one specific thought, which I all felt was necessary, but like this is he's almost like whittling away at what do I need to say, and so it's a quicker read in that sort of standpoint. But like
Yeah.
the book begins, well, it doesn't begin, but like there's a character introduced early on who discovers apples on this land, and that is like the good, like the goodness from the gods, very much like kind of recreating almost the Adam and Eve story in a sort of way.
Yeah.
And those apples like come to define so much of this land and what makes this land just naturally bountiful and magical. And if you fuck around with that and you try to find a life outside of what this land has given you, it's gonna like it turns the entire story on its head in this kind of horrifying way. There were two moments in this book where I was like reading late at night and I was legit chilled to the
Yeah.
bone, because the writing was almost in like a horror sort of mentality
Yeah.
that um you just you had to turn the page, but you're also like, fuck, I know what's coming. And then he'd spin that in a way that was more um I think you guys know the part I'm talking about, where
Yeah.
one of the characters discovers a bunch of pictures, from and movies from this from the land. Like, there were obvious elements to the supernatural aspects of the book, but they were written in such a way that when you were in them, like you were really just kind of horrified experiencing what the characters were. I loved it. I thought it was fascinating. All aspects of it.
The
Um,
imagery that he paints with, I'll just say quickly, is very,
yeah.
very beautiful too. It's super evocative. Like you can see the land like overtaking the house and then being cut back and then
Yeah.
coming in. There's just so much imagery. He writes so well about the natural world. It's incredible.
So you guys should check out Northwoods. We'll keep doing this. We have many more in the queue, actually. And I mean, we have a lot more to talk about.
Can I make one complaint? Is that allowed?
Oh,
Please.
of
Please.
course.
This is not about the writing. This is not about the story. This is about the book binding.
Okay.
I like a nice hardcover book that I can lay flat in my lap and read. And this one I had to hold up with two hands every time I read it. It got a little heavy. I would just argue a little bit of a looser binding would make this just like a 2% more enjoyable read.
That's awesome.
Noted. Daniel Mason Publishing. Who publishes that? We're gonna send them a little letter and
Random
let them
House.
know. Get it
Yeah.
together.
I mean, I just want to
Get it
say
together, Random House.
I don't have anything to add to that. I don't have any feelings on the binding, but I do
I bought a lot
think
of
that
hardcover books lately, and I just started to recognize like what makes a really good
Yeah.
hardcover binding
that's
versus what makes one where you like literally have to hold it up like this every time you
that's
read
totally
No,
fair.
it isn't. I felt annoying too because you couldn't like if I was reading a lot late at night and I couldn't like
it.
the
No,
lights were low and I had to like hold it close and yeah,
see, you get my pain.
I get
I
it.
do. I do too, but I'm choosing not to engage with it. But I do want to say that Daniel Mason, I'm trying to raise 3 kids and I have 2 jobs, and the fact that you're a physicist and author makes me you know, I don't think I think I have a lot of work to do. So thank you for
This is
what
what I
you
was
do.
talking about with Fish being more successful than me. See, we all have things we're aspiring to be. You
Yep.
need to become a physicist in the next 10 months and an author. I
Yeah.
need to sell out Worcester Centrum. We'll get there.
I'll just
I
keep
mean, people
reading.
are already booking hotels. They're ready
Yeah.
for us. Jordan's ready. Thanks, Jordan.
All right, we will see you guys on Father's Day to talk about summer 2003, the best Father's Day present that Brian could possibly ask for. As for the rest of us, we'll be along for the ride. So it'll be fun.
Exactly.
We'll see you guys next week.
Can't wait.
Let's
Thanks,
go,
Brian.
Ego.
Everyone.
Thanks, Megan.